Well. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I know this 9 o'clock start is probably late for you as well as it is for me. I actually made a little coffee and got a little ahead of myself there. But thanks for listening and figured some stuff out so we don't make the same mistakes we did last time up at the store. But I am down in my basement. I have the tigers on mute. Hopefully they do not have another game like last night. And if you hear a young child talking about Rainbow Dash or Pinkie Pie, that would be my child. I am right below her room. And of course, she is fighting sleep tonight. So maybe she should come down and do this. But in any case, if you hear that, that's her. Don't pay any attention to that. So what I want to talk about tonight is I really want to get into just some early pitfalls. I've seen this a lot over the course of the last 10 years, and then I've really seen them notice it when I started working with groups more in the last year or so, because I feel like a lot of times there's a lot going into this event for a group. Maybe it's to raise money, or it's just the camaraderie of being back on a team or something to that effect. But I see a lot of things that we can easily fix that might avoid some problems later on. So I really want to kind of dive into that, and that was a perfect time because June 14th and the time of this, and so most of you are either just starting. Most of you are just starting to get ready for fall marathons. Some of you running November marathons are getting going in a week or two. So this is a good compromise as far as time goes. So what I want you to know is that this guy here, you can ask questions. So if you're watching on your laptop, I think you can click this. You might have to actually be in Google Hangouts to do it. If not, you can type that. You can type that in if you want and ask away. You can be anonymous, and then it'll notify me when I get a question. The other thing you can do is, many of you are watching this through YouTube itself, which probably most of you are actually. And so there's a chat on the YouTube page. So if you're watching from a mobile device, you might not be able to access the chat. But if you're on a laptop, you will definitely be able to access the chat, and you can ask questions as far as that goes. And then if you think of something later on, you can always propose it in the run club, and we can address it there too. So number of ways that we can get to your questions, and I will be notified. Either way of what happens. So don't think I will miss it. And if I do, I'll come back and review these things tomorrow or something like that. So avoiding early pitfalls. What can we do? And so I've actually come up with the 5 biggest mistakes that I've seen over the course of time, and I'll cover those with the first one being poor goal selection. That's just usually the biggest determinant of how a segment's going to go with somebody. And honestly, I'm going to talk mostly about how picking a goal that's too fast is probably going to be the most detrimental thing. But you can, I guess, have the other way too and be too conservative on a goal. But the thing with that is, if you're in our system and you're working with us, then it's easier. It's much easier to come back and say, hey, you know what, we can adjust this faster. I would much rather have that problem than the other way, where we have to take time off and recover from a goal that's too fast. Second thing, being overzealous, being too excited at the start. And I definitely was contemplating not even talking about, because I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. I want people to be excited. I want people to be wanting to train and work hard, but there's definitely a fine line there. And I saw it quite a bit with some of my Boston folks that we'll talk about here. They were just super excited early on, and I felt like it came back and kind of bit them in the rear end 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks later, and really caused them to slow down and really losing a lot of confidence as well going into the last half of the training segment. So I want to talk about that as well. The third thing is cheating down paces, and this is a big problem. A lot of times it goes with number 1 and number 2, but just remember, faster is not always better. There's a reason why we prescribe paces, and if we wanted them faster, I'd prescribe them faster. But we'll get into a little bit of that and how that'll end up hurting you too. The fourth thing I want to talk about is piecing together programs, and so maybe not so much piecing our programs together, but really more about piecing, let's say like a Galloway program with our program, taking some elements of this and putting it with a little bit of that, and kind of coming up with a hodgepodge of a training plan. And there's reasons why our philosophies are different. And so if you incorporate different things from different philosophies, sometimes it doesn't work. So I'll get into that a little bit. And then fifth, I want to talk about not allowing for acclimatization. Many of you know, I just posted that blog yesterday and the day before about heat acclimating, and and it can go the other way too. It can go for adapting to cold weather as well. But especially early on, you've seen the posts on Facebook and the Facebook groups, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling so much. I'm not going to be ready, this and that, and I think we just have to cover real quick, like what's reasonable to expect, and really ease your fears on that. You're really just going to be just fine. You're going to be a-okay. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, so goal selection, the first thing we want to talk about, use of a race equivalency chart. So this could be, something like the VDOT, Greg McMillan's calendar, and even the calendar we have in Final Surge and we used to have on the app. Essentially, all they are is a proprietary algorithm. So Daniels has his algorithm, McMillan has his algorithm, and they spend a lot of money every year to protect that because it's made them a lot of money over the years, and I don't blame them. But it's nothing more than an algorithm that's basically saying you can run at a certain percentage of your VO2 max for a certain amount of time. So when you put in your race times, all you're essentially saying is that the time is more important than the actual race distance, because they're assuming that you can run at a percentage over a set amount of time. And so the further you get away, so you start out 5K mile time, you're getting closer to what you can run at your VO2 max. And just as you creep out to half marathons and marathons, your ability to run at a high level of your VO2 max diminishes. So it's kind of it's a pretty set and regular drop in that percentage. So it's fairly easy for them to calculate what percentage you could run a certain race at, and then spit out a bunch of times to you. But that's the thing, it's an algorithm, and it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to fit every individual, just like any plan isn't going to just necessarily fit any individual. It's you're taking what'll fit the vast majority of it, and you're giving 70 to 90% of the people something that will work for them, and you're always going to have 10 to 20, 30% of the people where it's not going to be the best fit for them. So you just have to keep that in mind, and we'll talk about how to really kind of maximize how to use that a little bit. And we definitely talk about this a lot more in our goal selection. So if it's in our files and resources, or in the Run Club, it's under the videos and stuff like that. So it'd be under philosophy or one of the training components, something like that. So I would definitely take a look at that as well. That'll give you even more in depth of what we're talking about now. But just remember, it's an algorithm, and it's not going to be perfect. So this is what I would get you to want to use trends if possible. So let's say you have a number of 5K, 10K, maybe even half marathons. the closer you get to that marathon distance, the better the race selector is going to be. So, you plug in your 5K and it says, oh man, I could run a 3-hour marathon, but my half marathon suggests I'm like 3:10. So that's giving us a trend. You're slowing down as your races get longer. And there's a number of reasons why that might happen. But, for all intents and purposes right now, we know you're probably not going to be a straight shot across from that 5K, 10K over. You're trending upwards, meaning you're slowing down as the distance gets longer. And a lot of people are like that. I kind of tend to be the other way, whereas, my marathon time suggests I could run like a 3:53 mile, and I just know that day is never going to happen. As much as I would like it to, I know that the sub 4 mile club is not going to happen for me. But that's the thing. If you have a bunch of races, you can do those things, and you can learn a lot about yourself. And most of you do that. But where you tend to get into trouble is aiming for those BQs, or trying to get into New York or something like that, and it just tends to be a fairly aggressive goal, and you don't necessarily know if you're going to be capable of doing that or not. So we have to be careful there. Look at the training for each race distance. So, I mentioned here, like, your 5K time might suggest you can run a 3-hour marathon, but your half marathon time suggests something like 3:10. There's a number of reasons why, but a lot of that could be from the training. So, what I kind of had in my notes was like, if you're running 30 miles a week for 10K training, that's pretty solid. You're going to be able to get pretty close to what your max 10K is going to be for you. 30, 40 miles a week, you're going to be a lot closer to that magic number than that same mileage for a marathon. So if you're running 30 miles a week and you're running a 10K, you're running 5 times the race distance every week. You run 30 miles a week for marathon training, you're not even covering the race distance over the course of 7 days. So you really, you just have to look at how that is. So that was my child running across the room. So, okay. So what we have to look at is the training for each distance, and and I'm not saying that your situation is going to be your situation. So if work is dictating what you can do, or family's dictating what you can do, that's how it is. But you just have to recognize that that's going to affect how fast you can run for that longer distance. Current ability versus peak ability, that kind of goes along with it. So if all your PRs are pre-kids, pre-family, pre-mortgage, pre-60-hour-a-week job, you can't necessarily use those PRs to put an equivalency chart and say, oh, I'm going to be capable of running this for the marathon. You've got to be more realistic than that. And personally, that's something that I've struggled with over the last few years, because I was running at a very high level, and then everything in my life sort of changed with family, kids, and that sort of thing. And so you really kind of you have to reevaluate what you can really do in training. And so I would just keep that in mind. And then also where your previous times are running. So I just had an email from a young man who wants to qualify for Boston and is running Chicago, I believe it was. But anyway, he ran his last marathon at St. George, which is in Utah. And if anybody has run that, you'll know that is a pretty quick course. It's actually so fast that you can't qualify for the Olympic trials on that course because the net downhill is too much. So it's a very fast course. And so, he was already fairly aggressive in his goal, and I steered him towards a program, but I also said, hey, listen, you have to recognize that St. George is a really, really fast course. And so you can't necessarily take where you ran that and put it into, even though Chicago's a fast course as well, it's still, like a quote unquote legal course. It's, it counts for records and things like that, whereas St. George doesn't. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So just keep that in mind. And then same thing, like, everybody's buzzing about, the San Diego half a couple of weeks ago. And, there were some fast times there, but, you also need to take a look at that elevation profile, and it's pretty quick. And I've run San Diego before, and it's where my PR is, and it's a quick course. So, I'm not arguing with that, because we all want those days, right? We all want a tailwind the whole way in a downhill course, and so when we get those days, we're not going to complain, and I'm not. But you just have to take it. You just have to take it with a grain of salt in what you're capable of. And then is your desired improvement reasonable? And I will show you. You've seen this chart probably in the second edition of the book. We also have it in some writings here on the website and everything. But I'll show that real quick too. So you need to make sure that what you're trying to do is going to be reasonable. So with that, let's talk about those of you who do not have any races to go by, which in all honesty, in our programs is not necessarily going to be the case. I mean, we have most people in our programs have run races. We're known as not necessarily a true beginning marathon program. So I feel like most people are all okay on this, but I think we still should mention some things on this. Especially maybe you're trying our Just Finish program or something like that, where your main purpose is just going to be building enough general endurance to get through the race. But decide if running the marathon is the best thing for you. And what I mean by that is, do you want the marathon to be your very first race? If you are, then I think you're really setting yourself up for potential disaster. You're definitely putting yourself in a hole, and that's scary to me. I would really recommend you going through a training cycle that's going to allow you to build up a race from 5K to half marathon, and then jump into a marathon training cycle. Maybe that's when you work with a coach and you say, okay, I'm going to, maybe take 24 weeks. And in that 24 weeks, I'm going to run a 10K to a half marathon and then completely switch over to marathon specific training, because that'll give you an idea of what you're capable of. And you're going to be able to continually build your fitness, gain some experience, gain some confidence, and be in a much better position to tackle your first marathon. If that's not the case, which is fine. I mean, I know with the charity component of marathon racing now, which is fine. I mean, I love the fact that people are raising money for good causes, but it unfairly puts people in a tough position to get ready for a race that they might not necessarily want to do, or be fully ready to train for. And that's where we have to come in as coaches and either educate and steer you in the right direction, or try to put you in a position where you understand what the risks are, and we'll do everything we can to try to get you to that finish line. So with that said, you are probably going to have some trial and error. I mentioned the building up races, but also, go back here. We talked about the first part. Can you build up races, which we talked about, and understand what type of runner are you? So that really is going to be some trial and error. So like if you find you do speed work not so good, but you're pretty good at tempo runs and you're pretty good at long runs, then maybe that endurance is where you're going to be better at, and so that might be able to help you steer you in the right direction. Let's see. Brett has a good question here, so I'll jump. Oh, let me finish this, Brett, and then I will answer that, because that's a good question. So learn how to react to training. Learn how things feel to you. That's going to help you try to nail down some paces. Your long runs are going to be a big key to you. Do you go out hard and fade? Can you practice going out easier and getting stronger throughout the run? Those are all things that are going to help you ultimately decide on a pace to run. And that's where I think you need to have a coach, not necessarily us, but if you're, a lot of times if you're doing like with a group, you have designated coaches, and ideally they're educated enough and experienced enough that they can kind of help you decide on what a good reasonable goal is. But you're obviously going to be a special case here. But lastly, on that component, what I would say is, in generally what you want to do is you're probably going to be in no man's land for a little bit. And so with that said, what I would do is always err on the side of caution. If you're too aggressive early on, it's going to rear its ugly head, with 8 8 to 6 weeks left to go in the segment, and that's the worst time to get hurt or sick or anything like that, because it really puts you behind the 8 ball as far as being fit enough to run. If I have to take any time off, am I going to be able to bounce back from that? Those types of things. So I'd be really, really careful with that, and I'd always err on the side of caution, because especially from my standpoint as a coach, it's going to be, I want you to be healthy, and I want you to have a good experience. And so for me to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm pretty cautious with things. Now, if you understand the risks and you're completely fine with swinging for the fences and striking out, then that's a different story. But me personally, I just want your experience to be a success. Okay, Brett, let's answer this. From one training cycle to the next, roughly, what can you expect on time improvement, assuming similar course, temperature, and humidity for a half marathon or marathon? What is realistic and what would be reaching too far? Well, that's actually a great question, because old coach has an improvement chart right here, and I know it's small. So that's hard for me to see. So current time, a 2%, so let's say you want to run a 4-hour marathon, or say you've run a 4-hour marathon, a 2% improvement would be 3:55, which is very reasonable. 4% would be 3:50, which would be pretty reasonable. 6% improvement. Honestly, I've seen people go from 4 hours to under 3:30 from one marathon to the next. The faster you get, the less that improvement's going to be able to occur. So I'll say your variables are going to be, assuming that everything's pretty similar, like Brett asked, your experience level. So if you're going from your first to your second marathon, that gap you can create is going to be much bigger than, let's say, going from your 9th to 10th marathon. That window is going to be a lot smaller, because you've probably put in more training. You've probably done things that you didn't do in the first few marathons. You're just more experienced. You've gone through the game. You know what to expect. Whereas the less experienced you are, and you go from basically minimal training to regular structured training, you can lop off a lot of time. But I think for most people in our situation, you're looking at anywhere from a 2 to 10% improvement, depending on experience level and in training abilities. So hopefully that answers. I think that's about what you were asking. Now, for me, look at that. If I could go from if I could just get a 4% improvement, I would be an okay runner to one of the best in the United States. I'd probably be an Olympian. So that 4% is different for other people. It's different for what group you're in. So just keep that in mind. So this chart actually I like a lot, because it shows you what I feel is reasonable, where you're going to have to start making adjustments, and then go from there. So hopefully that answers you, Brett. Excuse me. See, I don't have anything else. Let me see. Anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat. All right. So let's talk about being overzealous, which this one I did struggle with. Like I said, I didn't necessarily want to put it in, but we need to put it. We need to talk about this. It's the elephant in the room, right? So tough one. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, like I said, but I saw this a lot with my Boston crew. They're super excited. They were so pumped. And a lot of them were running Boston for the first time. And, some of it was my fault, because I didn't portray enough how tough, Boston's course is, and I wanted to be positive about it and be like, yes, you can PR, which you can PR. You just have to, get lucky a little bit with the day, and you have to get lucky with training going well and things like that. So you do need some things to go your way, but some of it I could have portrayed a little better. We're like, hey, listen, guys, this isn't going to be all sunshine and roses. It's pretty tough, but early on things are easy, right? So you're not, mileage is pretty low. We're just starting to build up. Workouts aren't super tough, so it's and we're excited, right? We want to get We want to get in there. We want to do well. And so I think that it's good to have that excitement, but you also have to keep the big picture in mind, right? Right now is your building base, right? It's okay to be easy right now. It doesn't necessarily have to be hard. And we can't really try to do everything at once. And it's like, so I think you almost have to prioritize. So let's say, if you evaluated yourself after your last marathon and you're coming into this marathon, you're like, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put all the pieces together. I'm going to make this one happen. And putting those pieces together mean now you're going to, let's say you're going to foam roll every day. You're going to do your core every day. You're going to fix your diet. You're going to strengthen your imbalances. So there's 4 major variables that we're now adding into our training plan. And throw that on top of, let's say you're trying Hanson's for the first time, which is a pretty, I think anybody who's done it will tell you, yeah, it's a tough program. You have to make a lot of commitment to do it. So now you're putting all of that on top of it, and you're like, yes, I'm going to do all this. I'd be like, hold up. Let's prioritize this. We know what the training is going to take a lot out of you. Let's prioritize all these other things and maybe add one of them right now. So maybe the easiest thing to do is just, fix your diet first. Let's focus on that, because fixing that, one, isn't going to take any physical effort, right? It's going to take a lot of tough decision-making maybe, but it's not going to take any physical effort. And so that's not going to have a negative impact on our recovery, things like that. It's actually going to improve that. And that's not to say that the other things won't either, but for the short term, it's going to be a negative on your training, right? It's going to put you in a little bit more of a hole, which then means you'll have to focus on recovery a little bit more. So, you really want to prioritize that. So maybe you tend to be, like I'm thinking of one of my clients right now I watched, he definitely needed to address his core right away. So for him, he can fix his diet and he can address his core, which he's doing now, which I'm very happy for him. He can address his core, and then we'll address the flexibility issues and the other issues. So that's what I would do. And because if you try, it's like the FIT principle we talked about before: frequency, intensity, type, and time. So we're already running 6 days a week, right? And then you throw on all those other supplemental activities. Intensity, it's going to be a varying intensity. And the other stuff might not be that tough as far as intensity wise, but now we're adding types as well. So we're going to jump up from one type of exercise. Now we're going to maybe add 2 or 3 types of exercise. And time, that's just time added to the total amount of exercise per week that we're doing. And so that wears us out. And if we're working, we got kids, all this and that, then you really set yourself up for digging a hole you might not be able to get out of. So I really want you to, take a step back, slowly add these things into your components. Be excited to train, but have the big picture in mind and know that, okay, this is the building period. It's okay to feel easy. If it feels hard right now, then it's not a time to get too excited either. Just try to keep the boat even, steady, just flowing down the river, not letting it sway one side or the next. You really just want to be even keel on some stuff, because it's going to get harder. And if you don't know it's going to get harder, you're going to find out it gets pretty hard. Okay, so cheating down, not selecting the right proper paces. We've talked about this. This was really kind of goes along with the lines, maybe you're a little overzealous, you're excited with a new goal, things like that. But it's very easy to get carried away with paces. And some people, I think, you're just excited, and over time it's going to work itself out. But other people, it's like, if fast is good, faster is better, and then you completely miss the point of the workout. And I'll be honest, I get pretty annoyed with this, simply because people say, oh, is it okay to go faster? Well, I took the time to tell you what paces to run. So no, it's not okay to run faster, because if I wanted you to go faster, then I would tell you to go faster. And for a lot of you, you're already trying to make a huge jump in training. So why make it harder on yourself to run faster than you need to run? Maximize what you can do at the current level first before you move on to the next level. And race at that level before you jump to a new faster level. You know what I mean? You have just because you can do the training doesn't mean you can race that pace. And I know many of you know this. I know this personally. You know, I can do workouts that would say, oh yeah, I can go run 13:30 in a 5K. No, you can't. I've never done it. So I can't continually beat my head against the wall and do those same things when I can't race to that ability. And that's where you have to really take the step back. Like, what good are those workouts do if you can't race at that ability? And that's what really frustrates me, is like, because you're just killing your own training plan. You're taking yourself out of the equation, and you need to be in the equation. So that's kind of my soapbox, just because this is one I work with a lot. I see it all the time. You know, like, oh, I just felt good. And, you know, once in a while, that's fine. You know, you go out there and you feel good and you walk on water. That's great. But when you do it day in and day out, you just get bogged down. You know, like, I have some people who are running their easy days faster than their marathon pace. It's like, you know, for me, it's like, well, then that's simply telling me that you just don't have the endurance. You need to get your mileage up a little bit more, so that you basically tire yourself out that you can't do it. Or you need to get that race in to prove that you can jump to another level, and then we can adjust. But you have to keep it in perspective. Easy runs are probably the most common, so are speed workouts too, because you're running short, fast intervals, and it's easy to cheat them down a second or two. So I would say those are the easiest. Long runs, you know, most people don't get too crazy on those, especially once the segment gets going in. But the thing is, you can't do it all the time. I understand you're going to get excited, you know, a couple days, but once you do it every day, you'll know in a month to 6 weeks, you're either going to get sick or hurt, and it's not going to end well. And then I don't really want to be blamed for it, because you know, I told you what paces to run. So I know that's a little cruel, but that's, you know, you have to be told the truth. You know, and that's what I see on a pretty regular basis. But one thing I will say is, a lot of times it works itself out, because you are running, let's say you're running 30 miles a week and you're going to build up to 60 miles a week. You know, it tends to work itself out. But 18 weeks is a long time. And if we dig that hole too soon, then it's awful tough to get out of. And like I said before, you don't want to be in a position where you're 6 to 8 weeks out, you get sick, you get hurt, you have to take a week off, you have to miss some workouts. That's the worst time you want to have to miss, because that's the meat and potatoes of your training. That's where we want you to be able to say, you know what, I can handle this. I'm just now getting into my peak fitness. You know, that's where you want to be. Like, I'm just now feeling good, so I can power through this, taper, and then I'm gonna race like a crazy person. So that's where you want to be at. You don't want to be surviving that last 6 weeks. You want to be building in that last 6 weeks. And that's, you know, this running too fast too early in the segment definitely is a big culprit of you feeling like crap later on in the segment. So that's all I'll say about that. I know I get a little excited on that one. A little bit more on it. Make a conscious effort to run the right paces. 99% of you are wearing a GPS. A lot of you are wearing heart rate monitors, this and that. You know, the whole world knows what we're doing as far as training goes. So you can't tell me you don't have the data to tell you to slow down. You can slow down. And the beauty of it is you're going to learn patience. And that is, if you learn one thing in marathon training, it should be to be patient. You know, a lot of you know that if you go and put 4 minutes in that first half of the marathon, you're probably going to lose 8 minutes the second half of the marathon. So there's no such thing as money in the bank, time in the bank. You know, you're going to lose all of it and then some. So you really want to be careful, and don't allow cumulative fatigue to become overtraining. We've talked about this before, but you know, cumulative fatigue is different because you might not feel the greatest, but you still hit your workouts. Overtraining is when you don't feel good and you can't hit your workouts, right? You can't bounce back from stuff. So you don't, and once you do that, then the only thing we have to do is scale everything back to a point where we're not building fitness anymore. We're recovering from the damage that we've done, and you don't want to let it get to that point. This question's come up a little bit. If I'm racing, let's say, so right now it's June, I've got a couple 5Ks, maybe a 10K coming up, and then I'm going to make that transition over into the full marathon training, which when we switch over to strength or whatever the case is. So they'll say, well, basically my 5K pace is faster than what the marathon timetable is showing. And there's a difference, like some people, we do speed work at 5K or 10K pace. I actually give all at 10K pace for marathon training because, one, I know you're going to cheat it down, and two, we're working on marathon speed. We're not working on overall speed. So it's relative to what we're trying to accomplish. But if you are racing a little bit during that time frame, I am okay with you running what your true 5K pace is, your true 10K pace is, versus maybe a slower version of what your marathon equivalent 5K would be. So hopefully that makes sense. So a lot of times people say, oh, I'm running at the 5K. They'll look at an equivalency chart and they say, I want to run a 3:30 marathon, and it's saying that I can run a 5K in 20 minutes, but I've run a 5K in 19 minutes. And so, they'll want to use that 19-minute pace over the 20-minute, the 20-minute 5K time. So they will be a little bit faster on the 5K pace. And what I'm basically saying is, if you want to race a 5K or 10K in the summer and you want that speed work for the marathon to kind of help you with that, then I guess I'm okay with you going towards that, what you've actually run, because you're going to try to run a race at that level. If you're not into racing, then I would err, as I said, I would err on the side of caution on that, and be conservative and realize that my goal is the marathon, not necessarily the summer racing. And that's what I think you got to weigh too. If you do too much summer racing or racing before a marathon in general, then you're trying to train for everything. And with the marathon and racing anything like a 5K, you're really covering the whole spectrum of fitness, and that's going to be tough to do and race well at all levels. But on the other hand, if you're super strong with marathon training, you're going to probably run a pretty decent 5K. But it's just something that I try to steer away from. Options, if you really have to go faster, if you say, man, Luke, everything I do is too fast. I am really trying. What else can I do? Shorten the recovery, keep the paces the same. That's one thing you can do. So let's say 12 by 400 at 10K pace, you're running way too fast. Let's say you're running faster than 5K pace. So that 400 jog that you're getting between each one is probably too much. Cut it down to 200 and see if that slows you down a little bit. The other thing I would do is I would step away from the track, which people I coach personally, I try to get them off the track for the marathon training anyway. I will have them do like bike pass stuff, whatever, just do stuff on the roads. Like people plug their workouts in their Garmins and just go on their regular running routes and do them. I'm perfectly fine with that. And that'll just slow you down. The effort will still be high, but the pace will actually slow you down a little bit. Okay. So now, what are we talking about now? Piecing together programs. This one I get more than I thought I would, but I guess it makes sense. So the Hanson's marathon method works as a whole, especially with the long run being the way it is, right? So when we talk about things like the 16-mile long run, the reason why that works is because everything we're doing before it, right? We're doing a pretty long, easy run on Saturday, maybe 10 miles, and then the next day we're doing 16. So we're doing 26 miles in the course of 48 hours, probably even less for some people, or 24 hours actually. So in 24 hours, we're running 26 miles. And then on Thursday, you have your tempo run, and then you go back and you've either had a speed or a strength. So you're doing a lot in that 6 days before, right? But that's what makes the 16-mile long run possible. If you're cutting a couple of those things out, then all of a sudden that 16 miles isn't as significant as it could be. And what I mean is like just working with somebody recently, they had pieced together, they'd taken some of Hal Higdon, they took some of us, they took some of Greg McMillan stuff, and they just basically took what they wanted. And that really gets you into trouble because, you're taking away from the philosophy, and it's all the ingredients that make the philosophy work. It's not necessarily interchangeable with other philosophies. That's why Hill-Higdon's philosophy works for some people, because they bought into that philosophy. The same thing with Galloway, same thing with, whoever, the 3-day programs, whatever, people bought into it. But the only way they work is with some of their ingredients. Same thing with us. It only works when you're putting all of it together. You're putting that big picture together. And the other thing too is when we piece together like that, a lot of times we take only what we like to do. Right? We're not going to take something out of a program. We're like, you know what, I really hate that 10-mile tempo, but gosh, I really like Yasso 800. So I'm just gonna replace those. And it's the same thing, right? It's still telling me what I can do for the marathon. It doesn't really work that way. They're two actually completely different workouts. And so you've got to be careful with that. And you're going to pick what you like and not what you need. And what you need is probably something that is going to be a weakness of yours that we need to get fixed so you can perform your best for the race. So that's one other thing too. So just some examples here, like, workouts can be changed for similar workouts. So like in my example, like the 12x400 that we do, yeah, you can change that out for short hills, maybe something like 10 by 1 minute hill or 10 by 2 minute hills. Or you can change it out for, a fartlek type workout. Say, hey, I want to do 12 times 130, or I want to do 12 times 2 minutes. That's totally acceptable. That's essentially the same workout. You're just doing it a different way. But you're working the same systems, right? You're working the same VO2 aerobic capacity systems where you're trying to work at the higher intensity. However, if you take, like I said, you take a 10-mile tempo and you replace it with, 4 by 1 mile at half marathon pace, or you do, a 20-minute tempo at lactate threshold pace, they're not the same workout. You're not stressing the same systems. So you've completely missed out on the benefits of what's going to be a specific ingredient for you to run well in the marathon, and replaced it with something that is really going to be good for general fitness, but it's not going to be race-specific fitness. And so you've really got to be careful with that. And that's when I think you really want to consider maybe talking to a coach. And just, even if you put something together yourself and you say, hey, just give me your thoughts on this, say, hey, this is good. This will work for you. Hey, this isn't probably a good idea. Maybe you want to change this up, keep this, this and that, it's unfortunate because we at this point that I've noticed is we're all coaches, it seems like. And it's just tough because, something that's worked for somebody might not work for another person. And, it's hard, tough. So hopefully I just hope you have somebody that's experienced enough, doesn't have an ego that's going to be my way or the highway, or, there's one thing to say my way or the highway versus having a philosophy and knowing it works. But I think you also have to be a little bit adaptable to that too. But hopefully you just have somebody knowledgeable to talk to. That's what I really hope for you. Otherwise, it's tough because you're going for them for guidance and they can't really guide themselves. So it's tough sometimes, but that's why you do your due diligence when you get a coach, and you find what works for you. But that's just my point, though. Some things will work in certain situations, other won't. You have to know that what you're replacing another workout with is going to stress the same system and give you both and give you the end result that you're looking for with the original workout, just maybe done a different way. So going back to that tempo run, maybe what I would do is say, man, I just struggle with tempos. I just can't find the rhythm on that tempo. Maybe I'll just give you marathon pace intervals. Maybe I'll give you 6 by 1 mile with a really short rest, or I'll give you 2 by 4 with a short rest, something like that. So you break it up, make it a little more manageable, but I'm still ultimately going to get the end result that I wanted to with the original workout. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Lastly, I want to talk about allowing to acclimate to your environment. As I mentioned, we just posted that blog the other day, gotten some pretty good traction. You guys like to look at pictures. I wish I had better graphs for you, but I don't. I'm not creative enough. But you've got to give yourself a few weeks to adapt to training. And in that, I don't have it offhand, but I know it's 10 to 14 days to acclimate to most everything you need to in the heat and the humidity, where you're going to see like 85% of your maximal adaptation. So in 2 weeks, you're going to see an 85% adaptation for most people. And here's the big if you're accumulating enough time in the weather, right? So I think the stats on that were like, you need to spend 2 weeks and you need to accumulate 90 minutes to 2 hours a day in that heat, especially at exercising intensity. So if you're only getting, for most people, you might only be getting 60 to 90 minutes right now. So you might not quite be reaching that threshold on most days. So that 14 days could look more like 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks of actually seeing those adaptations, because you are out in that weather, but you're not at that kind of that time threshold for a lot of you. So just keep that in mind. Like, in Michigan, it was literally snowing a month ago. And, it's been, the last 2 weeks have been in the 80s. So we really went from winter to summer. We went from basically February to August in the span of 2 weeks. So, you still got to give yourself that time. I know, I got a lot of people down in Florida and Carolinas, and they had that big tropical storm blow through that was so hot, so humid. It just devastated you guys. And, you're even more acclimated to that type of weather than what I would be, and you're struggling with it. So it's not you, it's not you, it's me. No, it just takes time to adapt to that. So give yourself a couple more weeks on that. If you're just starting out, give yourself a good 2 to 4 weeks to really feel better in that weather. So what you want to do is you really want to think about going more. What you're going to recognize is pace is not going to match your effort. You might be thinking, man, I am running so hard and it's, 30 seconds a mile slower than what I'm used to. That's okay. Just make sure the effort is there. Learn what those efforts feel like at paces, and ideally over 2, 3, 4 weeks, what you'll find is that pace is going to match that effort a little bit more as you get more acclimated. But it still might not even be a perfect match. But think about it this way. You read about people training at altitude, and their workouts are a lot slower than what they would be at sea level. And they don't, it doesn't really necessarily phase them because they know when they come to sea level, all of that's going to match up. Same thing with you guys. Well, one, it's going to put you in a better position to know what you're capable of in similar conditions, right? So you have that to go back on, right? Like I'm going to a race that's going to be hot and humid, and I'm training in the heat and humidity. Okay, this is really what I'm probably capable of. And so you might not run a PR, but you're going to have a much better race than majority of the other people. They're still going to go out too hard. They're going to fade, and you're going to clean up the mess, right? And that's what you want to do. If all else fails, at least have a good race. You're not going to PR all the time, but it might be that time you can find your way into the age group victory or something like that. You got to look for something other than just, okay, I'm not going to PR and let that devastate you. No, I'm going to still run well, and I'm going to beat a lot of people who usually beat me, or I'm going to, whatever the case is, you've got to use that to your advantage. Another thing I want to talk about is what you can do. So ideally you're accumulating that time. We talked about this in the blog. Easy runs, long runs, things like that, you can run outside. Like, you want to accumulate that because it's really the effort that's the bigger player, not necessarily the pace. If you really are on the pace and you really want to hit those pace, consider moving your workouts inside. Yes, I know you don't want to be running in a treadmill in the summer, but if the pace is important to you, that's when you might want to make that decision. Or start getting up earlier. Maybe, like if you're in Arizona, I know a lot of those cross-country teams out there are practicing at 6 a.m. Get out there before the sun comes up, because by 9, 10 o'clock, it's going to be hot as heck, and you don't want to be doing your workout then. Same thing here, here in Michigan, it's actually light by 6 a.m., but it's nice. It's a good 10, 15 degrees cooler than what it's going to be during the day. Or you go later in the PM. I mean, I'm thinking of Michigan, it's not dark till, it's 9:45, and I can still see a little bit of sun right now, still peeking out into the basement. So, it gets dark late, but once that sun gets down a little bit, it starts cooling off, even if it's 10 degrees cooler, it might save you a little bit on the wear and tear. And it still might be warm enough to get some of those adaptations that we talked about. It'd just be a little bit longer. It's not the full force, training in 85-degree weather, which, you probably want to have some balance in there anyway. So that's what I would suggest you do. Or just go, hey, this is how it is. Go by effort, and try to not get so caught up in how off those paces are. If anything, kind of track them over time and see how close those paces become to the effort as you give it 4 or 5 weeks. And I know it's hard to talk about it right now, but yes, we do train in winter too. And we have just as many issues. We have the cold. Actually, on the other end of that article I referenced yesterday in the blog post, they actually had, because peak was where the fastest times were running. So it was like right around 50 degrees where peak was at. And then they had peak, as I showed on the article, they had peak +5 all the way up to peak +20. And then on the other end, they actually had peak -5 and -10. And the percent that people slowed down was actually as significant as it was for +5 and +10. They still saw a decrement in performance. So it's gonna be hard. Well, one, a lot of times you have poor footing, right? You're wearing extra clothes, and cold temps do affect sweating and metabolism just as much as the heat does. So when you're shivering, that's your body trying to preserve heat. That means less energy to go towards running. You're shunting blood away to protect the core, protect the heart. So it's less blood that's going to be available for exercising muscles. Your VO2 max isn't going to be able to be as high, things like that. So you have to keep that in mind. So when you're first starting out, so if you're starting out training in December for Boston and things feel rough, hey, just give yourself a few weeks. This is why you're building into it, right? We're acclimating, we're building, we're establishing the routine, and then we still have, a good 12, 14 weeks of training before it really matters. So don't get too caught up in it. Let yourself adapt to your environment, and things will be a-okay. So I think a couple more slides here. One thing is, good thing is all of these things we talked about is great, because it's a lot of it's just taking time to think about what you're doing. So it's nothing that's going to be too crazy. I'm not asking you to, go out and buy a new pair of shoes or do this or do that. Really just take a look at what you're doing. Take a look at your environment. Take a look at what mistakes are you making, if any, and then just put a conscious effort into slowing down, or making sure you look at what your realistic ability is going to be for this race. Set a goal based on that and go from there. So it's just really taking an honest look at what you're doing and making adjustments, and then just recognizing, hey, I'm going to have good days, I'm going to have bad days. I'm not going to let the bad days get to me. I'll just reset tomorrow and I'll try again. And that's why it's practice, right? That's why it's training. We make those mistakes now so that we don't make those mistakes on race day. I want you to make these mistakes. I obviously don't want you to make those mistakes at all, but now is the time you make them so that you fix them now. But the key to that is you learn from those mistakes. You don't continually beat your head against the wall and wonder why you can't ever get to where you want to go, when all you're doing is spinning your wheels and making the same mistakes over and over and over again. That's what gets frustrating as a coach, because you see it a lot and you try. It's like I'm your mother trying to tell you to do something, and it's like, you should do it, but it's your mother telling you, so you're not going to do it. But then, your best friend tells you, and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. And it's the same thing I told you. So, I get it. Is that those types of things sometimes, but you just have to take an honest look at yourself, and you have to make a commitment to fixing the mistakes that you are. And I think a lot of that just stems from trusting the process and really trusting yourself too. A lot of you don't have the self-confidence to think that, man, I'm going to be able to do this, when you really do. You're capable of much, much more than you really think you are. I've seen it a ton of times. Once people once people get that belief in themselves and they know that they can do it, it's like flipping a switch. And that's when you see those people go from 4 hours to 3:30, even 3:20 in one race cycle, just because they develop that belief in themselves. They go through the program and they develop a belief in the program. And it doesn't matter if it's my program, it could be any program in the world. If you truly believe that it's going to work for you, then you're already a step closer to that. I could have the best program in the world, and you think it's a bunch of hogwash. You're not going to be successful with it. You're never going to be successful with something you don't believe in. And so you have to find that belief in whatever program you're using and yourself. And so, I talk about having a coach here. We've talked about it before. I think just being held accountable in a positive way, calling you out in a positive way, not derogatory or negative. Sometimes you have to be a little pushy though, but I always try to do it with the people I know fairly well. Other than that, you try to just keep it very positive, try to get them to see the mistakes that they're making. And then you say, hey, this is what we do to work on it, and let's put a plan together, and then try to involve you in the plan so that you take an investment in it as well. Because if you don't take investment in it and you just expect me to do it, at the end of the day, you still have to run. You still have to put the work in. I just write the programs. So if you are fully committed into it and invested in it, you're going to be a lot more likely to be successful as well. And then lastly here, I talk about just getting off the right foot. Any training plan is what's going to make it work. Recognizing that early on we're just building the mileage, we're setting the stage for the later work. I see it so many times. People want to push the envelope, they want to push it so early, and they have a race in mid-October. They're ready to roll by September, and then October rolls around and they're tired, they're done because they put so much effort early on. Your body just can't sustain that high level for so long. So you've got to let yourself build and let the fitness build naturally. Otherwise, you're going to peak out too soon, and then by the time the race rolls out, you're going to be burnt out. You're going to be tired. You're going to be you're going to be overtrained. You're not going to have that cumulative fatigue anymore. You're going to be flat out overtrained, and you're not going to be motivated. And then you're setting yourself up to have a terrible race. So build into it. Let these first 4 weeks be easy. Trust me, you're going to have plenty of time to put hard work in, and you're going to have plenty of hard work to put in. There's no lacking of workouts in this program. So just keep that in mind. But the big thing I want you to take in from this is trust the process, trust yourself, believe in yourself, and let the rest, and just let it happen. Don't force it. Don't force the fitness. Don't force it. Okay. So what did I miss? I don't know. You ask questions. Brett, I'm pumped that worked. I'm glad it worked. Maybe go in the run club and tell me how you did, or send me a message and see what you were doing to get on that hog and answer that question. But I'm glad that worked. I don't see anything popping up on the chat. So like I said, if you're watching via the YouTube, it might not work out so well. But in any case, I am glad that this worked out pretty well. And it's an hour. Perfect timing. I'm getting better at timing. Sometimes they go on forever. But in any case, if you have questions, like I said, you can ask away. You know how to get a hold of me. Run Club is good. I think it's great. We have these conversations on the message board, on the walls. I'm glad you guys are asking questions. You guys put some great stuff out there. Getting some great comments from other people using it too. It's great to see people chirping in on those as well. So awesome. Yeah. So okay. So it looks like, Brett, you were able to do a YouTube chat and awesome. Good. So yeah, that's about it for me. Like I said, ask the questions. You can ask them in the YouTube chat. I don't know how easy it'll be for me. I'll have to go back and see. So I guess if you want me to, the easier you want to make it on me, you probably just post it in the Run Club. So just saying. And then we can join in the conversation as well. So with that, I'm going to go to bed. And but I'll talk to you guys later. This is good. And also, any other topics you want that I don't have listed on there, just let me know. I love having things to write and content to put together for you guys. So it makes me stay on my toes as far as staying up to research and stuff like that. So I will talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of your week. Have a good weekend. And if anybody's racing this weekend, good luck. And we will talk to you later. All right. See you guys.